She was the girl with the quiet grace, the icon of elegance, the woman whose name still draws gasps when whispered, Audrey Hepburn. But what if I told you she was never alone at the top? That in the same years she rose to Hollywood's summit, there were women, rivals in beauty, talent, and public fascination, who nearly eclipsed her star. Grace Kelly, Elizabeth Taylor, Kim Novak. Their stories are legends unto themselves, but their rivalry with Hepburn, its pressure, its unseen battles, it is a story that's been mostly buried. Tonight, we reveal the rivalry behind the glamour, the echoes of fame that threaten to outshine the legendary Audrey Hepburn. Audrey Hepburn burst into international consciousness in 1953 when Roman Holiday earned her the Academy Award for Best Actress. She was instantly cast as the paragon of grace, originality, and refined simplicity. Hollywood in the 1950s was changing fast. Gender norms, studio systems, publicity machines, fan magazines, all of it was turning into a spectacle where image sometimes rivaled talent. Into that arena came women who embodied different versions of what a star could be. The royal elegance, the sultry seductress, the bold new face. They did not merely accompany Hepburn, they competed. Grace Kelly, Elizabeth Taylor, Kim Novak, all were contemporaries. Each had her own style, each captured the public imagination, and each, in her own way, threatened to redefine what people expected from a female star in those glittering years. By 1954, Grace Kelly won her own Oscar, Best Actress for The Country Girl, a victory that placed her directly in the conversation as one of Hepburn's closest rivals. By 1955, Elizabeth Taylor's work in Giant and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof pushed her to a new tier of stardom, heavy with sensuality, intensity, and fame. Kim Novak followed closely with Picnic, 1955, and The Man with the Golden Arm, roles that defined a more sensual, daring side of Hollywood. In this world, Hepburn's elegance was her strongest asset, but it was also a double-edged sword. Because as the public hungered for bolder images, for fierce passion and scandal, those with a more provocative aura sometimes drew more of the media glare. It's 1956. Grace Kelly, America's darling, has just married Prince Rainier III of Monaco. Overnight, she becomes royalty. Literally. The fairy tale wedding captures headlines around the world. For Hepburn, though, this is a critical moment. It's not that her career ends, or even that her talent is less, but rather the world's spotlight shifts. Grace Kelly now has both Hollywood glamour and regal prestige. She is not only an actress, she's a princess. Some biographers say, when Grace became princess, it was like Audrey was suddenly out of place in Hollywood. That's a weighty sentence. It suggests that celebrity is fragile, that image and public fascination can turn on something outside the control of the person. Grace's move to Monaco, her royal duties, her new public identity, they all gave her what many perceived as a greater legitimacy, a status beyond mere movie star. Elegance elevated into mystique. Hepburn continued acting, appearing in films like Breakfast at Tiffany's, 1961. But she was now being measured not just as an actress, but in comparison with Kelly's fairy tale real life. What the audience never saw. Backstage whispers, magazine covers that whispered comparisons. Who wore it better? Who seemed more regal? Reviews that spoke of Kelly's dignity versus Hepburn's demure charm. Kelly's limited film resume, she'd stopped acting after marriage, didn't matter. Her image did. The public adored her. Yet Hepburn did something Kelly couldn't. She transformed over the decades. She moved into humanitarian work, UNICEF, long after the cameras quieted. Her legacy would be more than roles and gowns. If Grace Kelly represented the regal dream, Elizabeth Taylor represented intensity, flame, desire, scandal. By 1955 to 56, Taylor was taking parts that demanded passion rather than poise. Giant, 1956, with its sweeping epic sensibility, and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, 1958, thrust her into prominence, not just for her beauty, but for her emotional power and her daring. Audiences were riveted. Critics praised. The wins and attention multiplied. Taylor was often compared to Hepburn, not always favorably in the eyes of fans who loved Hepburn's understated elegance. Some saw Taylor's style as more provocative. Others saw it as more raw. Elizabeth was considered by many as the new sex symbol, while Audrey was the girl next door. That wording captures the contrast that Hollywood and indeed the public wanted. Two ideals for women. One rooted in quiet refinement, one in fiery passion. There were stories also about competition for roles. Studios would sometimes choose one style over the other, casting Taylor in parts that demanded spectacle, Hepburn in parts that demanded sophistication. In marketing, Taylor's name was used to sell drama, Hepburn's to sell class. Even when Hepburn took on roles that maybe stretched her image, Breakfast at Tiffany's, for instance, with its moral ambiguity, public perception often boxed her back into elegant refined. Taylor broke that mold repeatedly. Multiple marriages, controversies, public romance, film roles that courted scandal. The press loved it. Behind the glamour was pressure, to maintain composure, to seem perfect. For Hepburn, criticism often came less for scandal and more for softness. For Taylor, it was the opposite. By the late 1950s, Taylor's fame was so large, her persona so intense, that many of her films overshadowed contemporaries simply by sheer publicity. For a star whose greatest strength was subtlety, that kind of spotlight could dim while others shone brighter. Then there was Kim Novak, a different beast altogether. Kim Novak's rise was swift. In 1955, she starred in Picnic and The Man with the Golden Arm, roles that leaned into sensuality, vulnerability, and a new kind of cinematic daring. Her image was glamorous, but layered with mystery. Beautiful, yet less polished, more provocative. She was attention, and she represented what Hollywood was beginning to crave: boldness, sensuality, stories that blurred moral lines. Where Hepburn offered purity, not in virtue but in simplicity and light, Novak offered shadow, depth, and edge. The press loved the contrast. Who was braver? Who would take the risk? This wasn't about feuds, it was about shifting ideals. The audience no longer wanted just grace, they wanted drama, scandal, fire. As Novak emerged, Taylor's fame peaked, and Grace Kelly left Hollywood for Monaco. Hepburn remained beloved, but now she was constantly compared, measured, sometimes overshadowed. Her roles reflected elegance, humanity, restraint, but louder images began to dominate. Taylor drew headlines, Novak drew whispers, Kelly drew royalty, and Hepburn? She adapted. She chose her roles carefully. Eventually, she turned toward humanitarian work, building a legacy far beyond the screen. But in those years, the rivalry wasn't about jealousy. It was about what the world wanted from its stars. And in a culture shifting toward intensity, elegance sometimes stepped into the background. Still, Audrey Hepburn endured, and she wasn't alone. Grace, Elizabeth, Kim, they weren't just rivals, they were reflections. Each expanded what a woman in Hollywood could be. Today, we don't remember Hepburn in spite of them, but alongside them. If you loved this glimpse behind the glamour, hit subscribe. And tell us, which of Audrey's rivals surprised you the most?